I should have turned around the second I saw the armed guards, but desperation makes people brave in stupid ways. If my phone had not died in the snow, I never would have walked toward the Romano mansion. And if I had not walked toward it, a 6-month-old baby boy might still be screaming his lungs out right now. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's go back to hours before where it all started. My name is Beatrice Lombardo, and I was not supposed to be standing in front of a mansion guarded by men with guns. I just wanted a nanny job and a paycheck big enough to keep my dad's heart from killing him and our ranch in the same year. The street was quiet in that expensive way that means the snow gets cleared on time and nobody leaves old cars parked at the curb. It was a few nights before Christmas. The sky above the Bronx was low and gray, and the snow had started as a soft mist and turned into real flakes that stung my cheeks. I shifted my cheap suitcase from one numb hand to the other and hugged my worn brown tote against my side. Somewhere deep inside that bag was my wallet with $86, my bus ticket back to Texas that I could not afford to use, and a little spiral notebook where I had written my interview answers 3 times. My phone screen flickered in my palm, turned blue for half a second, then went black for good. No map, no message thread with the address. No way to call my cousin Rosa and admit I was already lost. All I had in front of me was a long stretch of sidewalk and, at the far end, iron gates wrapped with warm golden Christmas lights. Beyond them, a stone mansion glowed like somebody had poured honey and money over it. Light spilled through carved wood and glass. Somewhere inside, music drifted faintly, the kind with real strings and not a radio ad in sight. This was not the modest townhouse Rosa had described. I tucked my chin deeper into my thrift store coat and tried not to think about how stupid it was to be wandering a strange neighborhood alone at night. If I nailed this interview, I could start paying off the medical bills stacked on our kitchen table back home. If I did not, my dad might have to sell pieces of the land my grandpa had worked his whole life. The thought of that land pulled me backward for a second, back to Texas, to dust and sunlight and the smell of hay. I grew up with cow manure on my boots and dirt under my fingernails. Our ranch was not big, but it was ours. Dad used to joke that the land knew our family by name. Even when he got older and moved slower, he would run his hand along the fence post like he was greeting old friends. Then last spring his heart betrayed him. One moment he was arguing with my little brother about which calves to sell. The next he was on the ground, skin gray, eyes wide. The ambulance siren still lives inside my skull. The hospital kept him, and it kept sending bills. Every envelope had a bigger number than the last. Add in my student loans and 2 bad drought years, and our ranch finances looked like a nightmare you cannot wake up from. I dropped out of college and came home, told myself I could fix it. If I worked harder, rested less, took on every job I could find in town, maybe we would catch up. Instead, I just got thinner and more tired, and the red numbers did not move. The guilt sat in my chest like a rock. Guilt that I had left in the first place to chase a degree. Guilt that I might come back and watch the only home I knew slip through my fingers. 2 weeks ago, Rosa called from New York. "B, listen," she had said, voice buzzing through my old phone while I scrubbed dishes in the sink. "There's a family up here looking for a nanny. Good pay. Safe neighborhood. They travel a lot. You send the money home, and you all can breathe again. I have never been a nanny," I told her. "I know cows and little cousins, not rich people's kids." "You know work," she said. "You know responsibility. You're drowning out there. Let this be the rope." I did not want to leave my dad, but he put his weathered hand over mine and told me he was not about to chain me to a pile of bills. If this job could help, he wanted me to take it. I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. 3 days on a bus gave me too much time to think. I practiced answers in my head. I pictured polite children with tidy hair and a mother who sent holiday cards. I try not to picture collectors calling the ranch while I was gone. Rosa met me at the station that afternoon, wrapped me in a hug that smelled like floral perfume and city air, and stuffed me in her tiny apartment long enough for a shower and a borrowed sweater. Then she looked at the sky, cursed the early darkness, and pressed a slip of paper with an address into my hand. "Family is waiting," she said. They are loaded, B. You impress them, and you are set. I repeated the address all the way onto the subway, tracing the numbers on my palm. Somewhere between one delayed train and a wrong transfer, my phone battery gave up. By the time I climbed the last set of stairs out of the station, the snow had thickened and the wind cut straight through the denim of my jeans. The houses on this street all looked like something out of a movie. Tall stone walls, gates, soft lights glowing behind heavy curtains. My boots crunched on the shoveled sidewalk as I counted numbers, lips moving silently. When I reached the one that matched my memory, my stomach turned. This was not a simple townhouse. This was the Romano estate. The iron gates in front of me were taller than the barn doors back home. Cameras watched from the corners. Two men in dark coats stood beside the entry, hands tucked near their belts, eyes scanning the street. I caught the outline of a holstered gun at one hip and nearly turned around right there. A normal person would have, but I had not been normal for a while. I was tired and cold and had promised my dad I would send money by New Year's. Walking away felt like letting his heart stop all over again. Just ask for directions, I told myself under my breath. Ask, then run to the real interview. No harm in that. I took a breath and stepped forward. One of the guards looked me over from my snow-damp curls to my tan cowboy boots. I tried to stand taller, like a woman who belonged near gates like this, not someone whose entire life was stuffed into one scuffed suitcase. Evening, he said. I answered, voice wobbling. I think I might be lost. I'm looking for an address around here. He hesitated, studied me again, then pressed a button and spoke quietly into a small device near the gate. The iron swung open with a soft creak, and he gestured for me to go up the path to the front door. Ask inside, he said. They will help you. I wanted to ask who they were, but my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I walked. Up close, the mansion was even more unreal. Warm light spilled through carved panels in the enormous wooden doors. Through the glass, I could see a hallway lined in polished wood and a Christmas tree, so tall it almost kissed a crystal chandelier. Gold and red ornaments glittered between strands of light. Wrapped gifts were stacked neatly at the base, like a picture in a catalog. For a second, the sight of it all made something twist in my chest. Last Christmas, I had strung cheap lights along the ranch porch with my little brother. We used an upside-down feed bucket as a makeshift step stool and drank cocoa that tasted mostly like sugar. It was messy and imperfect in ours. I lifted my hand to knock. That was when I heard it. A baby was crying somewhere inside the house. Not the soft whimper of a child who wants a snack. This was a raw, ragged scream, like his lungs were scraping against his ribs. The sound went on, rising and falling, but never really stopping. I froze with my knuckles inches from the door. Something primal in me reacted to the noise. I had soothed calves stuck in fences and toddlers with stomach aches, but this cry cut through the polished wood and the expensive silence and clawed at my instincts. This is not your job, I reminded myself. You're already late. Somewhere not far from here, a normal family is waiting for you to explain why you want to take care of their kids. Then I saw my dad again in my mind, pale in a hospital bed, breathing around wires and tubes. I remembered the way he had squeezed my fingers and said, "Go, B. Do not stay here and watch the walls close in." I had promised him I would try. Trying to not feel like walking away from a baby who sounded like the world was ending. Before I could think of every reason this was a terrible idea, I knocked. The crying grew louder, closer. Heavy footsteps hit the floor inside, fast and urgent. My heart sprinted to match them. I had just enough time to wipe my damp palms on the sides of my jeans before the door swung open. Warm air and light rushed out to meet me. The entrance hall looked like the inside of a storybook. Polished wood climbed the walls, catching the glow from a massive chandelier above. The Christmas tree I had glimpsed from outside stood in the center, its branches dripping with gold lights and ornaments that looked like they were made of real glass instead of plastic. The scent of pine and something rich, maybe cinnamon, wrapped around me. On the right side of the doorway stood a man I knew instantly was dangerous. Tall, broad-shouldered, olive skin marked with black and gray tattoos that covered his arms and curved up toward his collar. His dark hair was slicked back, his beard trimmed close to a sharp jaw. He wore a fitted dark green shirt that hugged his muscles and black trousers that looked expensive even to my untrained eye. In his arms, pressed tight against his chest, was a baby boy around 6 months old in a forest green onesie. The baby was shrieking, tiny hands balled into fists, face blotchy from crying. The man's eyes met mine. They were almost black, cold, and assessing, as if he was used to weighing people and finding them guilty. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. I swallowed hard and forced my voice to work. "Sir, I think I am at the wrong house," I said. The instant the words left my mouth, the baby's scream cut off. Just stopped. He hiccuped once, blinked wet lashes at me, and stared. The silence was so sudden that my ears rang. Behind the man, I glimpsed a housekeeper and another guard in the hall. Both of them froze. The baby stretched one small hand toward me, fingers opening and closing like he was trying to grab my sweater. A soft sound came out of him, not a cry this time, but something closer to a sigh. The man holding him, the man I would later know as Geraldo Romano, looked down at his son, then back at me, something sharp and wary in his gaze. Slowly, as if he was not quite sure this was real, he shifted the baby and nodded toward my arms. "Hold him," he said quietly. My heart tripped. I hesitated for only a second, then stepped forward and slipped my hands under the baby's small body. He was heavier than he looked, warm and trembling. As soon as I settled him against my chest, his tiny fingers curled into the front of my sweater. He let out one more shaky breath, turned his face toward my neck, and went limp. He fell asleep. Just like that. The hall seemed to exhale around us. The housekeeper's hand flew to her mouth. The guard stared openly. I had no idea what any of it meant. All I knew was that I was standing in a stranger's doorway, holding a baby who had stopped screaming for the first time in a long time, and a dangerous man was looking at me like he had never seen anything like me in his life. His gaze sharpened. "Who sent you?" he asked, voice low. I tightened my arm around the sleeping baby and swallowed. "My cousin," I managed. "Rosa." I was looking for another address. I think I got mixed up. Geraldo studied me, like I was both a threat and an answer to a question he'd been asking for months. Then he stepped back from the doorway and inclined his head toward the glowing hall. "Come inside," he said. "We can talk in here." I crossed the threshold, clutching the child who had gone quiet in my arms, and had the sudden, bone-deep feeling that nothing in my life would ever be the same after this. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing out the cold. Warmth rushed over my skin. The grand hall looked even more unreal from the inside. Polished wood gleamed under the chandelier. The tall Christmas tree shimmered with gold lights and ornaments that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. My reflection wavered across the glossy floor as I shifted Leo higher against my shoulder. A woman stepped forward, her silver hair pinned neatly at the back of her head. She wore a dark dress and an expression that fell somewhere between shock and disbelief. "Sir, he is sleeping." Her voice trembled the slightest bit. "He has not done that in days." Behind her, a tall black man in a fitted security jacket stared openly. "In months," he muttered. Geraldo closed the distance between us with silent steps. He hovered close enough that I felt the heat from his body, but he did not reach for Leo. Instead, he studied the baby as if afraid any movement might wake him. "Come with me," he said. His tone did not leave room for argument. He turned and walked down a side hallway lined with carved moldings and framed paintings. I followed, still holding the sleeping child, half convinced someone would stop me and say this was all a mistake. He led me into a smaller sitting room. Softer lighting, deep green furniture, a low fire crackling in a stone fireplace. It felt far quieter than the grand hall, like a room meant for private conversations. "Sit," Geraldo said. I hesitated only a second before lowering myself into an armchair. Leo stirred, so I adjusted him gently, humming a soft tune I use on cabs back home. His tiny fingers stayed curled in my sweater. Geraldo stood over me with his arms crossed. His eyes were dark, sharp, and unsettling in a way that made my pulse trip. The tattoos on his forearms shifted as he flexed his hands. "What is your full name?" "Beatrice Lombardo." "Who do you know in New York?" "My cousin Rosa. She lives in Riverdale." "Who gave you this address?" I swallowed. No one. I was looking for a nanny interview. My phone died. I got the wrong house. His eyes narrowed slightly. Explain. So I did. I told him about Rosa's call, the interview I was supposed to attend, the subway delays, the snow, the dead phone. I told him I had only meant to ask for directions. He watched me the entire time, his face unreadable. When I finished, he let a long moment pass before speaking again. You were not sent by anyone, he said. Not by a rival. Not by someone trying to get information. It was not a question. It was a conclusion, and it sent a small shiver up my spine. The housekeeper stepped into the doorway. Sir, she said quietly. She should know. Geraldo lifted his chin slightly. Permission. The woman moved closer, her hands clasped in front of her. There have been 39 nannies, she said. In 6 months. I blinked. 39. She nodded. Some lasted a week. Some lasted an hour. Leo screams for everyone. He refuses bottles. He sleeps in short bursts, no matter what any of us do. The doctors say nothing is physically wrong. But she hesitated. People talk. They say he is cursed because of what happened to his mother. My chest tightened. Cursed? He is just a baby. Tell that to the women who ran out of this house in tears, the housekeeper whispered. I looked down at Leo, sleeping peacefully with his cheek resting against my collarbone. His breath warmed my skin. He did not look cursed. He looked exhausted. I tried to lift him a little higher. He stirred. I froze, afraid I would start another screaming episode. But as soon as I hummed again, he melted back into sleep. The housekeeper's hand flew to her mouth. The security chief muttered something under his breath that sounded like a prayer. Geraldo moved slowly, lowering himself into a chair across from mine. He was still studying me, but something had changed in his expression, a softness that had not been there before, buried under the hardness. What was the agency going to pay you? He asked. I felt my cheeks warm. About $4,000 a month, I think. He nodded once. I will give you 12. My mouth fell open. 12,000. A private room and bathroom, he continued. Food. Anything the baby needs. Protection at all hours. You begin tonight. You stay for at least 6 months. The fire popped behind him. Leo's steady breaths rose and fell against my chest. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. $12,000 per month. That kind of money could erase my dad's medical bills. It could save the ranch. It could make everything I had been carrying feel possible again. But I also remembered the guards outside, the guns, the tension that hung over this house like a shadow. I had heard stories back home about families like the Romanos, whispered in low voices. Dangerous men, dangerous enemies. Geraldo must have read the fear in my eyes. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. I will not lie to you, he said quietly. My business brings enemies. Leo is my weak point. Some people would use him against me. I need someone strong, someone loyal, someone who does not scare easily. His gaze dropped to the baby in my arms. He chose you the moment he saw you. I do not understand it, but I see it. I tightened my hold on Leo. I do not know anything about your world, I said honestly. I came here for a normal job. You will not be unprotected. His voice was steady, absolute. You will be kept as safe as I keep my son. A landline phone sat on a table near the window. I gestured toward it. May I call my cousin? He nodded. I shifted Leo carefully, stood, and went to the phone. Rosa picked up on the third ring. B, where are you? The original family could not wait any longer. They hired someone else. My stomach dipped. No interview. No backup plan. No money for a hotel. No path home except the bus ticket I could not afford to use. Rosa, I whispered, glancing back at Geraldo. I found another opportunity. Is it safe? I paused. I think so. When I hung up, the silence in the room felt different. Heavy. Expectant. I turned back to Geraldo. I will take the job, I said softly, if you're certain you want me. He stood, slow and controlled. It is settled. The housekeeper stepped forward with a small smile. I will show you to your room. Before I followed her, Geraldo laid out the rules calmly. You live here. You do not take Leo outside without security. If anyone asks you questions about him, you tell me immediately. Nothing about this child leaves this house without my knowledge. I nodded. Understood. The housekeeper guided me through the hallways to a warm room with pale walls, soft bedding, and a window overlooking the snowy yard. She told me I could settle in after I put Leo in the nursery next door. That night, after she left and the house grew quiet, I stood at the window watching snow drift under the glow of the outdoor lights. I placed my hand on the glass and whispered, just long enough to save the ranch. Then I will go home. A thin cry pierced the silence. The sound was sharp but not desperate. Instinct pulled me toward the nursery. I pushed the door open and found Leo stirring restlessly in his crib. The moment he saw me, he stopped crying. I lifted him into my arms. He curled against my chest, tiny and warm, and let out a soft sigh. As I rocked him gently, one thought found its way through the haze of exhaustion and fear. This job was not going to let me keep my heart at a distance. Sleep pulled at my eyes, but Leo's warm weight and slow breaths held me upright until he finally went limp with real rest. I eased him back into the crib, tucked the blanket around his legs, and stood for a long time just watching his chest rise and fall. By the time my head hit the pillow in my room, the sky outside the window was already fading from black to a cold gray. The next morning came far too soon. I woke to a soft knock and the housekeeper's voice at my door. "Miss Lombardo, it is 6:30. The baby will be hungry." My body protested, but years of ranch chores had trained me to move when there was work to do. I pulled on fresh jeans and the warmest sweater I owned, twisted my hair into a loose tie, and stepped into the hallway. The nursery smelled faintly of powder and baby lotion. Leo lay on his back, kicking his feet and letting out little snuffling noises, the early warning signs of a full cry. When he saw me, his face brightened, and he gave a surprised little squeak. "Well, good morning to you too, little man," I murmured. I slid my hands under him and lifted him against my shoulder. Instead of screaming, he burrowed his face into my neck and made a contented sound that felt like gratitude. The luxury of his world hit me then. A sleek crib that looked custom-made. Shelves lined with designer toys and soft blankets. A set of glass bottles that cost more than my entire suitcase of clothes. There was a machine on the counter that warmed milk to the perfect temperature with the tap of a button. Back home, we had warm bottles and worn metal pots on the stove. Here, the machine hummed and flashed and delivered warm milk like magic. The housekeeper, who introduced herself as Senora Elena, watched quietly from the doorway while I changed Leo's diaper and fed him. At first her hands twitched like she expected him to erupt at any second, but as he drank peacefully, she relaxed. "He likes you," she said softly. "He never eats this calmly." I did not know what to say to that, so I just smiled and rubbed the little circle between Leo's shoulder blades the way my aunt had taught me. When he finished and settled against me, Senora Elena cleared her throat. "Come, I should show you the house, at least the parts you must know." We started with the basics. Nursery, my room, the bathroom I had to myself, all white tile and fluffy towels that hardly seemed real. Then the kitchen, which looked like it belonged at a cooking show. Rows of copper pots, shining appliances, a long island where staff moved efficiently, preparing breakfast. "This is where you can find anything you need for him," she said, opening a cabinet that contained neat stacks of formula, jars of pureed food, and an entire collection of bibs. "If something runs low, tell me before it is gone." From there, she led me to a room that felt colder than the rest of the house, even though it was heated like everything else. Screens lined one wall, each showing a different view of the property. A rectangular table stood in the middle with maps and folders spread out across it. "This is security," she said. "You met Carlo last night. He is head of the team." Carlo stood with his arms folded, dark eyes flicking from the screens to Leo and back again. "If you ever feel uneasy," he told me, "press the button on the pager in your pocket. Someone will be there." The idea that I deserved a panic button made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. On the ranch, if you got scared, you picked up a shovel or woke your neighbor. Here, men in dark jackets carried guns, so I could walk from room to room with a baby. Our last stop was the family wing. The hall here was quieter, the walls lined with photographs instead of paintings. A much younger Geraldo stood in some of them, usually with an older man who shared his sharp features, sometimes with business associates, sometimes alone. One photo stopped me. Geraldo stood with his arm around a smiling woman with dark hair and warm eyes. She cradled a round belly, her hand resting protectively over the curve. Both of them looked genuinely happy, the kind of happy that comes rare in life. "She is beautiful," I said softly. Signora Elena's gaze landed on the picture and softened. She was. On a nearby shelf, an engagement ring lay inside a small velvet box, the lid left open as if someone had meant to pick it up and never did. I hesitated before asking, "Is she Leo's mother?" "Yes," the housekeeper said. "She died in an explosion. The car was meant for him, not her. It happened days before Leo was born." The words hit like a cold wind. No wonder the house felt like it was holding its breath. No wonder everyone treated the baby like something fragile and untouchable. "People say this is why he cries so much," she continued in a low voice. "That he feels the fear still in the walls. That he carries her restlessness. I do not know. I only know that grief makes strange ghosts." I thought of my dad, of the way our empty kitchen had felt after his heart attack. I understood ghosts. Over the next few days, I learned how the Romano world moved. The staff drifted in and out on quiet feet. Meals appeared like clockwork. Security changed shifts with precise handoffs. Phones rang in distant rooms. Conversations behind closed doors sparked tension that leaked into the hallways. And in the center of all that, Leo and I built a little island of our own. He fought sleep at first, body wired from months of bad patterns and stress. But my body was used to routine, and I decided it should be too. I treated his day the way we treated chores on the ranch. Feeding, playtime, rest, repeat. When nap time came, I held him in the rocking chair by the window and sang the songs my mama used to hum when we were small. Old country hymns, soft Spanish lullabies my grandmother loved, silly little made-up tunes about fat calves and stubborn chickens. My voice was nothing special, but Leo did not seem to care. His eyes grew heavy at the sound, his fists loosening one finger at a time. I started a chart on the nursery wall. Times of feedings, naps, diaper changes, minutes of actual sleep. The first day, his naps were short and choppy. By the fourth day, one stretch reached nearly 2 hours. It felt like a small miracle. The staff noticed. They whispered to each other in the kitchen when they thought I was not listening. "Have you seen how he smiles now? He actually naps." She walks in and he stops crying. Just like that. I also learned why the other nannies had quit. Some had arrived expecting a rich household where their biggest problem would be picky eaters and strict parents. Instead, they heard late-night arguments behind office doors and saw men with guns in the hall after midnight. Others did not like being told to follow security rules. A few tried to make demands, sure their credentials gave them leverage, and walked out when Geraldo refused. But the biggest problem was always the same. They could not handle the screaming, Signora Elena said. No one could listen to a baby cry that long and not feel like they were losing their mind. I understood that. Those first nights were hard on me too. The difference was that I knew what it felt like to keep pushing through exhaustion because the animals needed you. I had worked through storms and sickness. I had seen calves fight for life. I was not about to give up on one small boy. I saw more Geraldo than I expected. He came to the nursery late, long after most of the house had gone quiet. Sometimes his shoulders were tight with stress. Sometimes his jaw looked like stone. But every time, he went straight to the crib. He picked Leo up awkwardly, like a man who had never had much practice and had no idea what to do with his hands. But he never flinched when the baby fussed or spit up on his shirt. He would hold his son close, press his lips to the soft hair at Leo's crown, and just breathe there for a minute. Then he would settle Leo back in the crib, touch the back of his little hand with surprising gentleness, and leave. One night, I watched from the rocking chair while he went through his ritual. When he straightened, he noticed me. "Is that new?" he asked, nodding toward the chart on the wall. "Yes," I said. I was trying to make sense of his rhythms. He stepped closer to read the columns. "He slept this long." He tapped the 2-hour stretch. "On your third night away," I said. "He seems calmer when fewer people are coming in and out. I keep his room quieter now, dimmer. Babies like routine. Loud voices and sudden changes make it worse. He stared at the chart for a long moment. I braced myself for him to bristle or dismiss the idea. Instead, he nodded slowly. "I will tell the staff," he said. "No more meetings near this wing at night. Security can run patrols elsewhere." I blinked. "You do not mind? The boy needs rest," he said simply. "If this helps, we do it." It was the first time I felt like he truly listened, not just tolerated my presence because Leo did. Little by little, the edges of the feared boss cracked. It showed in the way his shoulders relaxed when Leo laughed, in the way he asked if the baby preferred one bottle over another, in the way he stayed an extra minute to watch Leo kick on his playmat. As the days slipped into a new, strange kind of normal, home tugged at me harder. One night, after putting Leo down, I slipped into my room and dialed the ranch on the landline. My dad's voice crackled through, warm and rough as gravel. "Big girl," he said, "how are those city folks treating you?" "They have more forks on the table than we have in the whole house," I joked. "But I'm still alive." My kid brother shouted in the background, asking if the mansion had a secret passage and if I had seen anyone famous yet. I laughed until my throat tightened. Then my dad's tone turned serious. "You sure this is worth it, Mija? You sound tired." "I'm tired," I admitted, "but he needs me, and the pay will help. As soon as they run payroll, I will send money home." He went quiet for a second. "Just remember, you do not owe anyone your whole life, even for good money." "I know," I said. "I promise." When I hung up, the silence of the mansion felt heavier. Later that night, while Leo slept and I finished jotting notes on the chart, a sound filtered down the hallway. Voices. Sharp, agitated. I cracked the nursery door and listened. Down the corridor, near the office, Geraldo's voice cut through the air. Anger roughened it in a way I had not heard before. "I said family is not on the table," he snapped. "You can come after me. You can come after business. No one touches the boy." Another male voice answered, lower but tense. I could not catch every word, only fragments about territory and leverage and risk. My heart thudded harder. No one touches the boy. It hit me then that whatever I had stepped into was not just about a tired father and a difficult baby. There were people outside these walls who saw Leo as a weakness, who might be willing to hurt a child to get what they wanted. I looked back at the crib, at the small shape under the blanket, one tiny hand fisted near his face. Enemies were already sniffing around this family, and I had just tied my future to theirs. That thought sat heavy in my chest for days, even when things on the surface looked calm. The house slipped into a rhythm. Security patrols, staff schedules, Leo's new nap routines. Life felt almost normal if you ignored the cameras and the guns. Almost. One evening, normal shattered. Leo had been fussy all day, twisting away from bottles, arching his back, nursing a slow burn of complaints that never quite reached a full cry. By night, his patience snapped. He screamed so hard his face went blotchy. The chart on the wall might as well have been blank. Nothing worked. I tried everything. Walking, rocking, the slow figure 8 steps around the nursery, lullabies and white noise, and the trick my aunt swore by, rubbing tiny circles on his lower back. Nothing. My own nerves were starting to fray when the nursery door opened. Geraldo filled the doorway, shadows under his eyes, tension riding his shoulders. He had unfinished business written all over him, but his expression softened when he saw Leo in my arms, little legs kicking, fists flailing. "He has been like this long?" he asked. "Off and on since afternoon," I said. "It is worse now." He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. For a moment we stood there, the three of us caught in the dim glow of the nightlight, Leo's cries bouncing off the walls. "Give him to me," Geraldo said quietly. I passed Leo over, careful to support his head. The baby wailed harder at the transfer, not trusting the change. Geraldo's jaw tightened, but he did not flinch. He began to rock in place, but his movements were sharp and uneven, like a man who could command a room but had no idea how to sway. Leo fought against his chest, angry as a wet cat. "Here," I said, stepping closer. "You're holding him too high. Let his head rest right here." I placed my hand gently between his shoulder blades and guided Leo lower against his chest. My fingers brushed warm muscle. The cotton of his shirt stretched over inked skin. I pretended I did not notice the way my pulse jumped. "Now move your feet," I said. "Slow. Left, right, tiny bit of bounce. Like this." I stood in front of him and exaggerated the sway. He watched, copied, and within a few seconds his movement matched mine. Leo's cries dropped a notch. "Good," I murmured. "You're doing good. Try humming too." Babies feel the vibration. He raised a dark brow, like this was the strangest instruction he had heard in a while, but he did it. The tune was rough and low, little more than a hum on one note, but Leo responded. The screams took on a tired edge and then faded into hiccups. I found myself moving with them, swaying in time, close enough to feel the heat between our bodies. From a distance, it probably looked like a dance. A strange, quiet, desperate dance built around a single exhausted baby. Minutes stretched. Leo's body slowly relaxed, his fat fists uncurled, his head drooped against Geraldo's chest. The sound in the room softened in a breath and heartbeat. "See," I whispered. "He just needed both of us to be patient." Geraldo looked down at his son, then at me. Something in his eyes had shifted. Less ice, more rawness. He carried Leo to the crib and laid him down with surprising care, one big hand cradling the tiny head until it found the pillow. When he stepped back, he did it slowly, as if afraid any sudden movement might shatter the fragile calm. "Thank you," he said. "You did the work," I answered. He shook his head. "You show me how." We stayed by the crib for a moment, both of us watching to make sure Leo's chest kept rising steadily. Then Geraldo moved to the rocking chair and sat, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "I was meant to be in the car," he said quietly. The words felt dropped into the room like stones. I knew at once what he was talking about. "The one that exploded," I said. He nodded, eyes fixed on his hands. "It was arranged for that afternoon," he continued. "Meeting across town. Same driver. Same route. But there was a problem at the tailor, a delay, and she insisted on taking the car ahead of me." His mouth twisted. "She wanted to surprise me. Pick up the last of the baby things. Thought she could be back before I finished." He paused, swallowing hard. The device was under the engine. It should have taken me. Instead, it took her and two of my men. By the time I reached the hospital, all they could talk about was whether they could get the baby out in time. His fingers curled into fists. "She died because someone wanted me dead." Leo was cut from her body while the building still smelled like smoke. My throat closed. I had known she died. Hearing it laid out like that was different. Raw. Real. "I carry that every day," he said. "The knowledge that my choices killed her and nearly killed him. That every enemy who missed their chance is still out there, looking for another shot." The guilt in his voice echoed something inside me. It was too familiar. When my dad's heart failed, I was not there, I just said softly. He lifted his gaze, waiting. "I was at school," I went on, 2 hours away. I had been ignoring his shortness of breath for months, telling myself he would see a doctor, pretending the lines around his mouth were just age, not pain. He collapsed in the yard, and my little brother had to call the ambulance. Images I try not to think about came rushing back. The stark hospital lights, the machines, the tubes. When I walked into that hospital room and saw him hooked up to all those wires, I thought, this is my fault. I chose to leave. I chose to pretend he was fine because it was easier than pushing him to get help. I stare at my hands. Doctors told me the same thing they probably told you, that there was nothing I could have done, that sometimes bodies simply fail. It does not matter. When I look at him resting in his recliner and hear him try to hide his groans, I still feel like I failed him. Silence filled the nursery. It was not an empty silence, though. It was a heavy, sheer one. Geraldo nodded slowly. "We are both carrying ghosts," he said. "Yes," I agreed. "But they're not the ones in those cribs." We sat there for a while, two guilty people keeping watch over one sleeping child. For the first time, I saw the man behind the reputation. Not only the feared boss or the tattooed stranger in the doorway, but a broken son and a grieving almost husband who did not know how to forgive himself. Morning arrived with sunlight spilling across the kitchen and the smell of coffee. I carried Leo in, perched him in a high chair that probably cost more than my first car would have, and strapped him in. Geraldo stood at the stove in a dark t-shirt and sweatpants, frowning down at a pan of something that was trying its best to glue itself to the metal. "You know there's a chef?" I said, unable to stop a small smile. "He is late," Geraldo replied. "I thought I could handle pancakes. I had the mess in the pan." "You thought wrong." Leo gurgled loudly, as if agreeing with me. I stepped beside Geraldo, took the spatula from his hand, and poked at the batter. "First mistake. The pan is too hot. Second mistake. You stirred it like concrete. Pancakes like to be treated gentle." He looked at me with mock offense. "Are you calling me rough?" "I'm calling you a disaster in this kitchen." He snorted, the sound short and surprised, as if laughter was not something he used often. It made something flutter in my chest. We started again. This time I showed him how to wait until small bubbles formed on the surface before flipping, how to mix the batter with a light hand, how not to burn the edges. Leo banged his fists on the tray in approval, smearing applesauce across his face when I set a little spoonful in front of him. By the time the chef arrived, slightly out of breath and apologetic, we had a stack of slightly misshapen but edible pancakes and a baby with syrup on his nose. Leo laughed for the first time then, a Real laugh, sharp and sudden. He smeared pancake crumbs across the tray. Geraldo stared like he was witnessing magic. My heart squeezed at the sight. Small domestic moments like that started to stitch themselves into the days. Coffee shared in the quiet kitchen before the house fully woke. Quick conversations in the hall about Leo's new favorite toy. The way Geraldo would automatically take my empty plate to the sink without being asked. I caught myself noticing things I should not have. The way his forearms flexed when he lifted Leo. The care he took lowering the baby into the crib so as not to wake him. The way his eyes softened when he saw Leo reach for me. I try not to dwell on those details. I reminded myself this was temporary. A job, not a life. But feelings are stubborn creatures. The outside world kept pressing in. One afternoon, I was settling Leo on the playmat when I heard Geraldo's voice from his office down the hall. It carried, even through the closed door, edged with that hard tone I had come to recognize as business. "They are testing my patience," he said, using my son's name in their meetings. "Asking who will protect the baby when I am gone. They think I will fold just to keep him out of it." A lower voice responded, something about territory lines and a family try to expand. The words blurred, but the meaning was clear. Another group was pushing into his world and using Leo as a taunt. Later, Carlo appeared in the nursery with a respectful nod. "New orders," he told me. "From now on, you and the boy are never alone in the yard. If you go downstairs, someone goes with you. Do not take it personal." "I did not plan on wandering," I said lightly, but inside, unease curled tighter. "Good," he replied, "because some people forget a baby is not just a baby here." The more the outside pressure grew, the more I saw subtle shifts in Geraldo. His visits to the nursery lasted a bit longer. His hand lingered a second more on Leo's back. Sometimes, when I carried the baby down the hall, I would catch him watching us from a distance, eyes thoughtful. Not just checking security, but looking, really looking. One evening, I came out of the nursery with Leo against my hip, his head lolling sleepily on my shoulder. Geraldo was leaning against the wall, phone in hand. He slipped it into his pocket as we passed. "Long day?" he asked. "For both of us," I said. "He is teething, I think." He reached out and briefly touched Leo's tiny fist where it curled in my hair, his fingers brushing my curls as he untangled them. The contact sent a warm shiver along my scalp. "Thank you, Beatrice," he said quietly, "for staying." I met his eyes. "You keep saying that like I'm doing you a favor. You are the one paying me." "It is more than money," he replied, voice low. I could not argue with that, not when Leo sighed contentedly and pressed closer to my neck. Later that week, after another long day, I was walking past the security office when I heard two guards talking. "You really think he's going to bring the kid?" one asked. "He says he will," the other answered. "Public image. Charity event. Big tree lighting in the square. Cameras everywhere." "It is a bad idea," the first guard muttered. "Too open. Too many people. If anyone wants to make a move, that is the perfect stage." "The boss says his son will not grow up as a ghost," the second replied. "He wants the boy to see the lights, to live like a normal child, as much as he can." They fell silent when they noticed me, nodding politely as I passed. I kept walking, but my mind snagged on their words. A public tree lighting, crowds, cameras, the most wanted man in the city showing off his infant son. I pictured Leo's small hand gripping my finger, his big eyes reflecting Christmas lights. I also pictured strangers in a crowd, watching, calculating, waiting. Enemies were already sniffing around this family. And the boss I worked for was about to step out into the open with the one person they most wanted to use against him. That thought stayed with me all night, curling under my skin like a chill I could not shake. By morning, the house was bright and quiet again, snow light bouncing off the windows, as if danger could not possibly slip through all that softness. Leo did not know anything about enemies or territory lines. He only knew that his world was a warm room with a mobile above his crib and a woman who kept showing up whenever he cried. He woke early, talking to himself in little vowel sounds. I found him on his back in the crib, one sock kicked halfway off, kicking his chubby legs like he was marching against the mattress. When he saw me, his face split into a gummy grin. "Well, good morning, sir," I drawled, scooping him up. "You look real busy already." After a diaper change and a bottle, I laid a blanket on the floor and set him down on his stomach with a few toys spread around him. He had just started to figure out rolling, this grand, slow-motion job that took all his focus and half his energy. "Come on, you can do it," I encouraged. "Left arm over, right leg up. You got this." He grunted, pushed, and tipped himself onto his back with a little thud, eyes wide like he had surprised even himself. I clapped. "Look at you," I said. "Strong as a little bull. Next thing I know, you're going to be racing around this house and giving security a heart attack." He flailed his arms in triumph, then grabbed for the nearest toy, a stuffed animal with long ears. His fingers closed around the ear, missed, tried again. His concentration made me smile. I stayed on the floor with him, narrating every move in my Texas drawl the way my mama used to narrate chores to us when we were kids. And now we reach for Mr. Bunny. Good grip, excellent form. 10 out of 10. Oh, and here comes the roll. Do we stick the landing? We do. The crowd goes wild. He let out a squeal that might have been a laugh and kicked, delighted with himself. At some point, I leaned over to tuck his sock back on. His little hand shot up, clumsy and determined, and patted my cheek. "Hey there," I said softly. "You like making sure I am really here, huh?" His fingers pressed against my skin, then slid to my jaw. He stared straight into my face, brown eyes serious. His mouth moved around a bubble of sound. "B." I froze. "What did you say?" I whispered. He blinked and did it again. "B." For a second, my brain tried to file it under random baby noise. Just another sound. But then he smiled, patted my cheek a second time, and repeated it, clear as anything. "B." It hit me then. Not a coincidence. Not a jumble. His first word. And it was my name, or at least the part everyone who loved me used. Something cracked open inside my chest. Joy flooded in first, bright and sharp, the kind of happiness I had not felt in years. Right behind it came grief, just as sharp. I had always wanted to be a mother someday, in some far-off, safer future. I had buried that dream under hospital bills and obligation. Hearing this little boy claim me as his person knocked the breath out of me. "Oh, baby," I murmured, scooping him up. "You're going to ruin me. You know that?" He laughed, gurgling nonsense and B all mixed together, as if he liked the way the sound felt in his mouth. Tears stung my eyes before I could stop them. I pressed my cheek against his soft hair and let myself feel it for a moment, the weight of being chosen by someone so small and defenseless. He did not know my debts or my fears. He just knew that when he was scared or tired, I came. "B, I'm here," I promised, voice thick. "I'm right here." I waited until Leo's next nap to go find Geraldo. He was in his office, sleeves rolled up, papers spread across the desk. A phone lay on the table, screen dark, as if he had just finished a call. When I stepped into the doorway, he looked up, the usual guarded expression in place. "Is something wrong?" he asked immediately. No, I shook my head quickly. "Nothing is wrong. I thought you would want to hear this." He stood, tension tightening his shoulders. The boy. He is fine, I reassured him. More than fine, actually. Some of the strain eased from his posture. You have my attention, Miss Lombardo. I rolled my eyes a little. You can call me B. Or Beatrice. Not Miss Lombardo. That sounds like someone who knows what she is doing. For a moment, amusement flashed across his face. Very well. B. What happened? He said his first word. I said. Geraldo stilled. It was like watching a statue try to breathe. His first word, I finished. You might want to come see for yourself. We returned to the nursery, where Leo was awake again, lying on his back and busy kicking at the dangling toys above him. I knelt beside him so he could see my face. Hey, sweetheart, I said. Can you show Papa what you said earlier? Geraldo crouched on the other side of the blanket, big hands resting on his knees. What did you say, figlio mio? He asked gently. Leo turned his head, eyes jumping between us. His gaze landed on me. A slow smile stretched across his cheeks. He lifted his hand toward my face again. B, he announced. Geraldo sucked in a breath. The sound was small, but full of something that made my heart twist. Again, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Leo reached for me, fingers curling in the air until I leaned closer and let him grab my chin. B, he repeated, then laughed, delighted with himself. I laughed too, swiping at a stray tear. He is very proud, I said. Geraldo's face did something I had not seen before. All the sharp lines softened at once, like someone had taken the weight off his shoulders for a second. His smile, when it came, was unguarded and young and heartbreaking. Of course he is, he murmured. He chose well. The words made my stomach flutter. I looked away, focusing on Leo instead. By that evening, the entire staff knew. Someone had heard from someone who had heard from the housekeeper that the baby had spoken, and the word had not been Papa or any variation of it. It had been B. No one teased me. They just looked at me with a new kind of respect and something that felt a lot like affection. To celebrate, the kitchen turned out a small cake, nothing fancy, just a single layer with vanilla frosting and a few sprinkles someone had found in the pantry. We gathered around the big table. Leo sat in his high chair, banging his hands on the tray while the staff clapped and cheered as if he had just graduated from college instead of bouncing syllables off his gums. I helped him smash a tiny piece of cake into his mouth. Frosting ended up on his cheeks, his nose, and my sleeve. He laughed again, that high, pure sound filling the room and washing away, for a little while, the darker things that usually lived in the corners. Speech like his father, Carlos said dryly. Short and direct. Better audience, I shot back, making a few people chuckle. Geraldo sat at the far end of the table, watching all of it. When our eyes met, he lifted his glass of sparkling water slightly in my direction. A silent toast. To Leo. To first words. To the woman his son had decided belonged to him. Later, when the cake had been eaten and crumbs cleared, Geraldo called everyone's attention from his place at the head. There is something else, he said. The hum of conversation faded. In 3 nights, the foundation is holding our annual tree lighting in the main square, he continued. We raise money for shelters, food banks, families who do not have enough for the holidays. The press will be there, and so will many of our partners. He glanced at me briefly before going on. This year, my son will attend. A ripple went through the room. I felt the tension spike like a temperature change. I thought of the guard conversation I had overheard and swallowed. Security will be tight, Geraldo said. Nothing will happen to him. His words were absolute, but I noticed the muscle ticking in his jaw, the way his fingers tapped once against the table as if he were rehearsing the promises to himself. Part of me wanted to stand up and say the plan was reckless. Dragging a baby into a public event when people were already using his name as a threat felt like handing wolves a map. Another part saw what Geraldo meant. He did not want Leo to grow up knowing only locked doors and cameras. He wanted his son to see the world beyond the gates, even if it was just a lit tree and a crowd. After the meeting broke, Carlo found me in the hall. I want to go over protocols with you, he said. For the event, we sat at the kitchen table while he laid it out. You stay within arm's reach of either me or one of my men at all times. The stroller stays harnessed unless I tell you otherwise. If anyone bumps you, looks too interested in the baby, or makes you uncomfortable, you signal. This is your pager. He pushed a small device across the table. Button here. Press once. We will know. What if something happens too fast? I asked, fingers tightening around the little plastic rectangle. Then you do not try to be a hero, he said, meeting my eyes. You protect yourself and the kid, and you trust us to clear the rest. I nodded, though my stomach was knotted tight. That night, after giving Leo his bath and tucking him into his crib, I went to my room and tried to sleep. The wind rattled softly at the windows. Faint city sounds drifted up from far below, distant sirens and engines, reminders that life outside the estate kept moving whether we were afraid or not. When I finally drifted off, my dreams twisted. I saw crowds of faceless people, flashes of light that might have been cameras or gunfire, heard Leo crying for me somewhere I could not reach. I woke with my heart pounding and the taste of fear thick on my tongue. The baby monitor glowed on the nightstand. I grabbed it and held it against my chest like a shield. From a nursery next door came the soft, even sound of Leo's breathing. Safe. For now. I lay back down, clutching the monitor, and stared at the ceiling until the first pale strip of dawn crept across it, wondering how I was supposed to walk into that square and trust the world with the boy who called me by name. The day of the tree lighting came anyway. By late afternoon, the house was a storm of preparation. Security checked equipment twice, then a third time. Staff carried garment bags and boxes through the halls. Outside, engines rumbled in the drive as black cars lined up like a small convoy. In the nursery, things were quieter. I dressed Leo in a soft dark green sweater and tiny pants that matched the color of his father's shirt from the night we met. His hair refused to lie flat, so I smoothed it with my fingers until it curled gently over his forehead. You ready to see the big tree? I murmured. Real big. Much bigger than the one in the hall. He gurgled and kicked, catching my wrist and dragging my fingers to his mouth. I will take that as a yes. Downstairs, Geraldo waited near the front door, already in his coat, his expression carved into the polite, distant look I had started to recognize as his public face. The moment his gaze landed on Leo, some of that hardness eased. Handsome, he said, brushing a thumb over his son's cheek. Just like his mother. My throat tightened. I buckled Leo into the stroller harness with extra care, fingers double-checking every strap. Carlo came over with two of his men. Each wore a coat that hid a vest beneath. Earpieces curled along their necks. You remember the plan? He asked me. Stay close. Do not wander. Press the button if something feels off, I recited. He nodded. You stay on this side of the stroller, he said, tapping the handle. I will be on the other. No one gets near the kid without going through one of us. It sounded simple in the quiet entryway. It felt like trying to hold back an ocean with a fence. Outside, the cold hit hard, crisp and biting. We climbed into the first car, Leo's stroller folded into the trunk, his small body snug in my arms for the ride. The city lights blurred past us, all reds and whites, and blinking decorations in shop windows. By the time we reached the square, the sky had gone full dark. The space was packed. Strings of bulbs hung between poles. A band played somewhere to our right. The air smelled like roasted nuts, sweet dough, and exhaust. The main tree towered over everything, wrapped in lights that winked against the deepening night. Photographers clustered near a small stage, cameras ready. A local news crew had set up near the base of the tree, a reporter adjusting her scarf while someone powdered her nose. The security team spilled out first, scanning the area, eyes constantly moving. Then Geraldo stepped from the car. The energy of the crowd shifted, parting around him like water around a rock. People looked, some openly, some from behind cups of cocoa and paper bags. I emerged with Leo in the stroller, keeping my hands wrapped tight around the handle. Carlo walked on my left, another guard on my right. More followed behind us, forming a moving wall. Public image on the outside, I thought. Private fear on the inside. Geraldo slipped his mask on like a coat. He nodded at sponsors, shook hands, thanked donors. When the reporter approached with her microphone, he smiled his polite smile and spoke about giving back to the community, making sure children had warm meals and safe places to sleep. While he talked about shelter beds and food drives, my eyes were not on him. They were on the crowd, on faces, on hands, on anyone who seemed more interested in the stroller than the stage. Leo, blissfully unaware, stared up at the lights with his mouth open in pure wonder. The fake snow machines along the stage sent flurries of foam drifting down, and he lifted his hands to grab at it, fingers closing on nothing. "Yeah, that is pretty magical," I whispered, leaning over him. "First big city tree. Not bad, huh?" He looked at me, then back at the lights, then back at me again, like he could not decide which was better. I laughed softly and, despite myself, pulled out my phone. The new one Geraldo had insisted I have, with a strong case and his number programmed under a name that did not match his reputation. "Okay, look right here," I said. I snapped a quick photo of Leo's round face lit by the glow, eyes wide, tiny nose pink from cold. Looking at the image on the screen made my chest ache. For a brief moment, it felt almost normal. Just me and a baby at a holiday event, surrounded by music and laughter and the smell of fried dough. If I squinted, I could pretend there were no guards, no threats, no whispered names in dark offices. Then the countdown to the official lighting started. The mayor or whoever had the microphone began the numbers. 10, 9, 8. The crowd joined in. People lifted their phones to record. Children squealed. Leo kicked and waved his arms, caught up in the excitement without knowing why. 7, 6, 5. Carlo shifted closer, his hand brushing my elbow, a silent reminder that we were not here as regular people. 4, 3, 2, 1. The tree exploded into full brightness. The crowd roared. A few fireworks popped overhead, sending little bursts of color into the sky. The band burst into a holiday song. For a moment, my guard slipped. Leo's delight was contagious. He slapped the stroller tray, eyes shining, and let out a surprised shout that might as well have been a cheer. "That is right," I laughed. "They did all this just for you." I did not see the man in the delivery jacket until he was right beside me. He stumbled, arms full of stacked boxes, and bumped into my shoulder. "Sorry," he muttered, sounding breathless. "Crowd is crazy." I tightened my grip on the stroller, trying to shift away. Before I could, a woman materialized on my other side. She wore a charity vest and carried a donation bucket with the tree logo on it. "Spare some change for the kids?" she asked brightly, leaning in. "Too close," my instinct screamed. "Too close." "I do not have cash," I said, trying to move the stroller forward, but she stepped in front of it, smiling as if to block my path by accident. "We'll just take a second," she chirped, fingers already reaching toward the stroller harness, like maybe she was adjusting something. Maybe she was just helpful. Maybe it was nothing. In one practice swipe, she unhooked the strap across Leo's waist. The world narrowed. The man in the jacket dropped one of his boxes and lurched, hand shooting toward the stroller handle. At the same time, the woman shoved hard against my shoulder, knocking me off balance. The stroller tipped, wheels lifting. I did not think. I moved. Instead of grabbing for the stroller, I dove for Leo. My body twisted, years of practiced reflex from catching falling calves and squirming cousins kicking in. I scooped him out of the seat, clutching him to my chest just as the stroller crashed sideways. We hit the ground. My knees slammed into the cold pavement. My palms took the rest, skin tearing under the impact, grit grinding into the flesh. Pain exploded on my arms, hot and sharp. Leo cried out, frightened by the sudden motion, but my body curled around his, every instinct focused on shielding his head, his spine, his tiny ribs. Around us, chaos erupted. People screamed. The music cut off in a jagged stop. Someone shouted, "Get down." The man in the jacket lunged again, fingers clawing at the space where Leo had been a second earlier, but Carlo hit him from the side, taking him to the ground. The woman with the bucket tried to bolt, but another guard grabbed her arm, wrenching it behind her back. The bucket hit the pavement, coins scattering like metal hail. Sirens wailed somewhere close, rising fast. I stayed on my knees, hunched over Leo, until a familiar voice cut through the noise. "B. Geraldo." He reached me in what felt like one breath, coat flaring behind him. He dropped to the ground beside us, one hand hovering near Leo, the other cupping the back of my neck. "Are you hurt? Is he hurt?" His voice was shredded. Leo was crying, but it was the offended, scared cry of a baby who had fallen, not the silent scream of real pain. I loosened my hold just enough for Geraldo to see his face. "He is okay," I gasped. "He is okay." I cannot say the same for my hands. Blood seeped from torn skin, pooling in my palms. Bits of grit clung to the raw patches. The cold made the sting even worse. Geraldo saw the mess and swore under his breath. "Get the cars," he barked without looking away from us. "Now!" Security moved fast, half of them pinning the attackers until uniformed officers swarmed the scene, the other half forming a tight ring around us as we were hustled back toward the vehicles. The crowd parted, faces blurring past. I caught flashes. A woman covering her child's eyes. A man holding his phone up, recording, because of course he was. The tree still blazed behind us, oblivious. By the time we reached the car, my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Geraldo helped me in, then took Leo from my arms just long enough to buckle him into his seat on the opposite side. His hands were gentle, movements efficient. When he slid in beside me and the door shut, the noise from outside dulled to a muffled roar. The car jerked into motion. I looked down at my hands. Blood smeared across my fingers, already drying around embedded specks of black. My stomach rolled. "It is not bad," I said, even though no one had asked. "Just skin." I realized my voice was trembling. My whole body was trembling. Geraldo reached over and took my wrists carefully, turning my hands palm up. His fingers were steady, but his eyes were not. They were wild in a way I had never seen before. "You threw yourself onto the pavement," he said quietly. "You could have broken your wrists. Your neck. You did not even hesitate." "They were going to take him," I whispered. Saying it out loud made my throat close. His grip tightened for a second, then softened. He drew in a slow breath. "You just saved my son's life," he said. I shook my head, but he cut me off. "Again," he added. His voice broke on that single word. Something hot pricked the back of my eyes. I looked across at Leo, strapped in and still sniffling, his lashes wet, his little chest rising and falling fast. If my hands had to bleed for him to be there, alive and within reach, then so be it. The rest of the drive passed in heavy silence. By the time we reached the Romano mansion, security had already locked the place down. Floodlights washed the front steps. Guards stood in every doorway. The moment the car lurched to a stop, the doctor rushed out with a bag of supplies, coat flapping behind him. Inside, everything felt sharper. Edges of voices, clicking radios, boots moving quickly over the floors. But in the middle of it all, Leo's cry pierced through, raw and shaking. Geraldo unbuckled him with hands that trembled ever so slightly, then placed him gently in my arms as though giving him back to the only place he trusted. "Take her to the blue sitting room," he ordered, "and bring the doctor." He walked beside me the whole way, steps matched to mine. He never let his gaze drift from Leo's face. The doctor worked first on the baby, checking his pupils, his breathing, his balance, then declared him uninjured, only frightened, only shaken. When the doctor turned to me, I was still clutching Leo, his cheek pressed to my collarbone, his fist curled tight in my shirt. "Let me see," the doctor said softly. I extended my hands, or tried to. They shook too hard. Geraldo reached out and steadied them, his palms warm against my wrists as the doctor cleaned away the dried blood and grit. The antiseptic burned. I hissed and squeezed my eyes shut. "Not too deep," the doctor said. "She will be sore, but she'll be fine." Fine. As if that word still existed in this house. When the doctor finally finished wrapping my palms, Leo had fallen asleep against me from sheer exhaustion. His breath puffed warm against my throat. His tiny fingers still refused to let go. Geraldo had not stepped back once. The door clicked softly behind the doctor. Silence settled over the room like dust. Then everything inside me cracked. The adrenaline drained so fast it felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. A sob climbed up my chest with no warning. I tried to swallow it, tried to keep it contained, but the fear from the square hit all at once. The shove, the grab, The sight of Leo dangling between strange hands. The cold pavement grinding into my palms as I lunged for him. "I cannot do this," I whispered, tears spilling hot and fast. "I cannot live in a world where people try to take a baby under Christmas lights. I cannot." I thought I could handle anything, but that was different. Geraldo stepped closer, slow, as if approaching a frightened animal. "You could have died," he said quietly. "You know that." "I know," I choked. "I know." He lowered himself into the chair beside me, close enough that our knees almost touched. He leaned his elbows on them, hands clasped, head bowed. "You saved him twice," he said, voice thick. "Once the night you stepped through that door, and every nanny before you had failed him. And again tonight, when you threw yourself onto the pavement without a single thought for yourself." I pressed my cheek to Leo's soft hair and let another sob break. "You think I do not notice?" he continued. "You think I do not see what he is like with you? The way he sleeps. The way he looks for you before anyone else. You're the reason I sleep at all. You're more than staff. Not just to him. To me." The room felt too small for the weight of his words. "He feels like mine," I whispered. "And that terrifies me, because I cannot lose him. I cannot go through that again. My dad almost died while I was at school, and I thought it was my fault. I cannot let anything happen to this baby. I would not survive it." His jaw tightened, a muscle ticking near his temple. "You will not lose him," he said. Before he could say more, the door opened and Carlos stepped in, face grim. "I have news," he said. Geraldo straightened but did not move away from me. "Talk." Carlo hesitated just long enough to glance at Leo and then at my wrapped hands. "We intercepted a message," he said. "The hit was ordered by Vescari." Geraldo's eyes went flat and dangerous. Carlo continued, voice low. "He wanted leverage. Said he planned to take the boy and the girl from Texas." The words struck like a physical blow. My breath stopped mid-inhale. Geraldo stood slowly, controlled, but rage radiated off him like heat from furnace. "Where is Vescari now?" "Hiding. For the moment." "For the moment" is not good enough. Carlo gave a single nod and stepped out. Geraldo turned back to me. His eyes were no longer anger. They were resolve. Hard and sure. "We are leaving tonight," he said. "I have a property upstate. Secluded. Only a handful of people know it exists. You and Leo will be safe there." My heart pitched. "We," I said, voice faint. "Yes," he said. "My lieutenants will run things here while I am gone. I will not risk you again." He walked to the mantel and braced his hands on it, shoulders rising and falling in slow breaths. "You have an out," he said without turning back. "I will give you cash. Enough to get home. Enough to start over. No one will bother you. If you decide this is too much, I will arrange travel tonight." My chest tightened so sharply it hurt. "Leave. Go back to Texas. Step away from danger. Step away from blood and threats and guards and alarms. Step away from Leo." I looked down at him, curled against my chest, breathing softly now. His fingers had loosened their hold, but still rested lightly on my shirt. His little body trusted mine. Trusted my warmth. Trusted my heartbeat. Leave him in this world without me? The thought was unbearable. I swallowed hard, then looked up. Geraldo finally turned, waiting. "I'm going wherever Leo sleeps tonight," I said. For a long moment, he did not move. Then something in his face shifted, softened, broke. He nodded once. "Pack for cold weather," he said quietly. His voice held something new, something unspoken, something that made my pulse jump. I nodded back. Tonight, our lives would change again. Tonight, we would disappear together. A makeshift family hiding from a world that refused to leave us in peace. And whatever waited for us at that lake, I already knew one thing. I was not walking away from them. The drive north took hours. Traffic thinned, lights faded, and the city glow gave way to long stretches of forest where snow dusted every branch like powdered sugar. I held Leo in the back seat, his warm little body curled against me, while the guards' convoy stayed close behind us. By the time we turned down an unmarked road, only a single pair of headlights followed. The trees closed in, tall and dark, and then the safe house appeared. A two-story cabin sat near the frozen lake, smoke drifting from the chimney, soft golden lights glowing through the windows. Snow piled on the roof and coated the wide porch railing. It was nothing like the Romano mansion. Smaller, quieter, almost gentle, exactly the kind of place you could breathe again. Inside, the air smelled like pine and wood smoke. Only 2 staff greeted us, both older men who had clearly worked for the family for years. No bustle, no constant movement, no radios crackling in the background. Just warmth, steady and quiet. Geraldo carried the bags to the stairs while I took Leo to the living room. A stone fireplace crackled low. A thick rug covered the wooden floor. A large window overlooked the lake, where faint moonlight glimmered over the ice. Leo wriggled until I set him down, and he immediately crawled toward the fireplace, squealing at the dancing flames. I laughed softly and followed him. For the first night in weeks, it felt safe enough to unclench. Our days settled into a routine almost immediately. Breakfast in the kitchen, where Geraldo insisted on making the coffee. He somehow remembered exactly how I liked it. A little cream, a tiny bit of sugar, always poured into the same chip mug before anyone else was awake. Leo played in the living room, stacking wooden blocks and knocking them over while I sat on the rug beside him. Sometimes I caught Geraldo watching us from the doorway, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. Sometimes he joined us, lowering his large frame to the rug with surprising gentleness, letting Leo tug on his sleeve or climb in his lap with happy chirps. In the afternoons, when the sun hit the lake just right, the ice glimmered blue. One day, I stood by the window with Leo on my hip, admiring it. "You ever skate?" Geraldo asked behind me. I snorted. The closest I came was sliding around in mud after a rainstorm. He smiled just barely. "Come on." He lay skates on my feet on the back porch while Leo watched from inside with one of the older guards. The cold stung my cheeks as we stepped onto the ice. Geraldo held my hands, steadying me. "I do not think this is a good idea," I said. "It is a great idea," he countered. It was not graceful. My ankles wobbled. My balance betrayed me. But he stood close, guiding my hands, his breath warm on my cheek as he talked me through each step. When I slipped and grabbed his coat, he caught me around the waist without hesitation. For a moment we stood there, breathless, faces inches apart. The wind swept across the frozen lake, and everything felt still. Too still. I pulled back first, heart pounding, blaming the cold for the heat on my cheeks. Nights were their own kind of intimacy. After Leo went to sleep, Geraldo and I ended up in the living room, sitting across from each other with mugs of tea or warming our hands by the fire. We talked about things neither of us had said aloud before. He told me about growing up in a house where power was currency and kindness was rare. About how he never expected to be a father. About the night he lost the woman he loved and how he still heard the explosion in dreams. I told him about ranch mornings, the smell of hay and horses, my father's laugh before it got tired. I told him about the guilt I never stopped carrying, and how Leo's first word had broken something open inside me that I did not know was still whole. There were moments when the distance between our chairs felt thinner than paper. Moments where I wondered if he felt it too. The message came 3 days after we arrived. Carlo drove up from the city, snow caked on the tires, and stepped inside with a look I could not read. Geraldo met him at the door, shoulders tense. They spoke in the kitchen, voices low but serious. I hovered in the doorway until Carlo left again. Geraldo closed the door behind him and leaned against it. "What happened?" I asked. He looked tired in a way I had not seen before, but also relieved. "They arrested Vescari," he said. "He got caught in a weapons shipment. Federal case. He is not getting out." The words seemed to settle somewhere deep in my chest, loosening a knot I did not know I had been holding. "So we are safe," I said. "For now," he answered, "and probably for good." He pushed away from the door and walked toward me. Slow, hesitant, as if choosing every step. "I want more for Leo than guards and alarms," he said. "I want him to grow up running down hallways without fear. I want him to have a normal childhood, or as close as I can give him." I swallowed, unsure where this was leading. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could see the shadows beneath his eyes. "I've fallen in love with you," he said quietly. "But if you want a life far from my world, I will not hold you here." You deserve peace. You deserve something soft. The room felt suddenly too full of air. My heart hammered. I stepped closer. His breath hitched, only a little. "I've been falling for you since the night you opened that door," I said. I tried to pretend I wasn't. I tried to tell myself it was just the baby, but it is not. His eyes softened, tension melting from his shoulders. Before fear could creep in, I reached up and cupped his jaw lightly. He leaned into my touch, just enough. Then I kissed him, a slow, careful kiss that deepened when he lifted a hand to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. Heat bloomed through me, steady and overwhelming, washing away every doubt. When we finally pulled apart, foreheads touching, I whispered, "I am not leaving. Not unless you ask me to. And I will stay if we raise Leo together. With no lies between us." "You have my word," he murmured. Sometime that evening, another call came in. Voices murmured in the hall. Papers exchanged hands. When Geraldo returned to the living room, something in him looked settled, complete. "Confirmation came in," he said. "Vescari is in federal custody. The case is strong. He is not coming back." Relief washed over me. He came to stand beside me, watching the snow fall outside the window. "Next Christmas," he said softly, "I want Leo to see the big tree in our hall again. But this time as a free child, not a hunted one." I looked up at him, warmth spreading through my chest. "I want that too." We checked on Leo together. He slept peacefully in the travel crib, tiny hands curled near his face. Geraldo adjusted the blanket, and I reached out to do the same. Our hands brushed, then rested together on the soft fabric. The moment held. And just like that, the future did not feel impossible anymore. 1 year later, snow was falling again. Soft flakes drifted across the Romano estate, settling on the tall stone archways and glowing warm against the strings of Christmas lights wrapped around the balcony rails. The mansion looked almost peaceful now, touched by a gentleness it had not known the first night I saw it. The guards were still present, but fewer, less tense. The danger that once hung over the property like a storm cloud had faded into something distant. Inside, the grand hall was alive with the scent of pine and cinnamon. A massive Christmas tree stood in the same spot it had the night I first stepped inside, its branches heavy with gold ornaments and soft white lights. I had walked into this hall with $86 in my pocket and fear in my throat. Now I walked in wearing a simple wedding band. Beatrice Romano. My name still felt new, soft around the edges, like it needed to be worn a little more before it fully sank into my skin. A small shriek of excitement echoed from behind the tree. "Mama B." Leo came barreling toward me on unsteady toddler legs, his cheeks flushed pink and curls bouncing. 16 months old and determined to conquer every inch of the world before nap time. I scooped him up just before he tripped over a stray ornament hook. He squealed and grabbed my face with sticky fingers. "You helping Daddy decorate?" I asked. He nodded with the fierce seriousness only a toddler could manage. "Star." Geraldo stepped out from behind the tree, holding the small gold star topper in one hand. A year had changed him too. The hardness in his shoulders had softened, though the strength was still there. He still looked like the man who had once opened a door with a gun on his hip and a screaming baby in his arms. But now there was warmth in his eyes instead of suspicion. He came to stand beside us, brushing a kiss to the top of Leo's head. "You ready to help me finish the tree, Piccolo?" he asked. Leo stretched his arms toward him, and Geraldo lifted him high. Together, they placed the star at the top, Leo patting it proudly when it settled into place. The staff clapped from the doorway. Not stiff, polite applause, but genuine affection. They treated me not like the outsider who once wandered in by accident, but as the woman who ran this household with them. The woman who belonged here. We spent the morning decorating. Leo insisted on handing me every ornament one at a time, even if it meant toddling across the hall for each delivery. Geraldo strung lights along the railing while humming under his breath. Every now and then he would glance at us with that small, private smile that told me exactly where his heart was. When Leo grew tired and settled into my lap with a plush reindeer, I took in the room fully. The hall was brighter than the year before, not because of the lights or the crystal chandelier, but because the shadows felt gone. The tension that once lived in the walls had been replaced by something hopeful. Just like us. In the afternoon, while Leo napped, I stood by the wide window overlooking the courtyard. Snow fell steadily, covering the stone walkway I once stood on with a dead phone and a borrowed coat. Back then, I had been cold and alone and terrified of losing everything. I thought about the long year between then and now. The rival boss had been sentenced after the federal case shook his empire apart. His crew scattered into hiding or fled the state, leaving no one with the nerve or power to threaten Leo again. Geraldo spent months shifting his organization away from the violent business his father built, investing instead in legitimate ventures. There were still pieces of that old life he had to manage, but the days of constant danger were over. And in the quiet that followed, we had built something real. I had helped establish a charity fund in Leo's name for children who lost parents to violence. The paperwork had arrived last week, stamped and official. My father had cried when I told him. Sometimes healing looked like replacing what had been stolen. Later, I found myself standing in the doorway of the grand hall, the exact spot where everything had changed. Geraldo came to stand beside me, his shoulder brushing mine lightly. Leo toddled around the tree with a soft toy duck, occasionally stopping to make it quack at passing adults. He was loud, happy, and free in a way that would have been impossible a year ago. Geraldo followed my gaze. "You were thinking about that night." I nodded. "It feels like a lifetime," I said. He touched my hand, fingers brushing mine gently. "You told me you were at the wrong house," he said, "but you were exactly where you needed to be." My throat tightened. I looked out at the hall, remembering the snow in my hair, the panic beating in my heart, the baby screaming in his arms. Every nanny before me failed, I said quietly. 39 women who tried to calm a baby who thought the world was out to hurt him. I placed a hand over my chest, and I only meant to ask for directions. Geraldo turned slightly toward me. "You gave him peace before you even spoke your name." I thought about the string of tiny coincidences that led me here. The dead phone, the wrong subway, the snow, the glowing gates, the screaming baby pulling me forward when any sane person would have walked the other way. What looked like a mistake had been the beginning of my real life. Leo spotted us and toddled over, arms stretched high. "Mama B." I lifted him easily, settling him on my hip. He pressed his cheek to mine, warm and soft, and I felt that familiar ache in my chest, the one that said I would protect this child with everything I had. I looked at Geraldo, at the life we had built through chaos and fear and love we hadn't expected to find. "I came here looking for a paycheck and directions to another job," I said. Instead, a screaming baby, a tired crime lord, and a wrong door gave me a son, a husband, and a home. I kissed the top of Leo's head. Sometimes the wrong address is exactly where you belong. Geraldo's arms slipped around my waist, pulling us close as snow drifted outside the tall windows and warm lights painted the hall in gold. And for the first time in my life, I felt exactly where I was meant to be.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.